Welcome to the LowCarbUSA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
Okay, so welcome, Ken. I have Ken Berry with me, for those of you who don't know, which I don't think there's any of you. But it's been a while since I've actually spoken to you. And the main reason that I asked you to come and speak with us here was you've just been a speaker at a past event in Boca Raton in Florida. And it became apparent to both of us, I think, about how important it is that we get more people in the room, and why it's so important to come to these meetings in person if you possibly can, because it is just so different. And you've just got such a good way of putting that I thought maybe you can help us explain to people why it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So human beings are a very curious mammal. There are certain things that, we try to be very modern, right? We have the latest iPhone and we have this and that, but there are several things that modern is not the right answer for. And one of those, as you know, is diet. Our DNA and our physiology is very, very ancient. And if you try to feed a highly processed modern diet to us, we get fat, we get sick, and we get pre-diabetic, and we get fatty liver. Well, in that same vein, I think that our need for human interaction, our need to be part of a tribe, our need to meet new people, but at the same time form lasting, meaningful relationships in person, I think the research is very clear that that's very important for overall mental health, but also just to help us to be better humans. And I think that should be the goal. If it's not the goal of every single one of us, is to be a better human tomorrow than you were today. And I don't think, I'll repeat it again because I think it's very important. The research that's been done in this area, I disagree with some of it, but the vast majority of the research, I agree 100%. We have to meet in person. We have to talk. We have to gossip. We have to see each other and smell each other and shake hands and touch each other. Those things are a vital part of the definition of being a human being. And we've been through the last couple of years here, 2.5 years now, of not being able to do that. And some of us have become very afraid of that, in fear for our very lives if we meet people in person and we actually touch their hand with our hands and we get closer than 6 feet to them. Some people have developed almost a clinical anxiety to doing that, and I think that's decidedly unhealthy. Now, the part of the research I do disagree with is they'll say that you cannot form meaningful relationships over social media, and I think we've all seen that that's not true. It's definitely not of the depth and width of an in-person relationship, but I think meaningful relationships can be formed over social media. But I think it's always in anticipation of, and with the hope of, one day meeting that person in person, right? That's the ultimate goal. You meet this really great person on Instagram. You guys have the same story. You're on the same journey. You're making the same progress, and that's great. You can support each other, but there's always perhaps even an unspoken goal of one day we're going to consummate this relationship by meeting in person, and by hugging each other, and by shaking hands, and looking each other in the literal eyes, not in the virtual eyes. Because you may have noticed it's very hard to establish eye contact on social media, on Zoom. Because if I'm looking at your eyes right now, then I'm not looking at the camera. So it looks to you like I'm looking down. But if I look at the camera, then I lose your eyes. And now I'm just talking to a little pinhole on my computer, which is weird. And so it's like this up and down thing you have to do constantly in order to make this feel like a real human interaction.
Right.
And there are so many people out there, and many people, if they're in a smaller community or even in a larger community, but they're sheltered for whatever reason, they feel like they're the lone voice in the wilderness, right? It's like I found this low carb thing, this keto thing, this ketovore thing, this carnivore thing, and it's helped me so much. But then, when I post something on social media to the 200 people that follow me, they all just ignore me, or I don't know if it even gets served up to them by Facebook or whomever. It's like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm lost in the wilderness. I'm on this journey all alone. And human beings can do things on their own, but it's just so much more natural and more comfortable if you're part of a tribe that has the same goals.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned community a couple of times there, and I think that's what I feel is so important about this. I started to tell you before we got on air here, but when I did my very first event back in 2016 in San Diego, I was just like spinning like a top. And I didn't really get a chance to look around and see anything. I had heard people talking about seeing groups of people in town who were so excited about this opportunity to be at this meeting, but I never saw it for myself. And then when we were in Florida at our next one, 6 months later, it was a smaller event. We were our expo and registration was like right outside the main hall where they were setting up, and I was sitting onto the side of the registration table, like doing my thing, but I was aware of what was going around. And I remember this girl coming up to the table and talking to Pam and saying, like, she was literally in tears, and saying, like, I don't even think I should be here. I'm supposed to be a health coach, but like, look at me, I haven't lost all that weight yet myself. But I'm so much improved, but I'm struggling because my husband, my friends, my doctor are all telling me that I need to stop and I'm killing myself. And the reason I came was just to try to see if that was the case. And Pam was saying, no, like, really, please stay and just see what you can learn from it. And we watched her grow through that whole weekend. And she was like, oh my God, like, everybody gets it. I'm not defending myself all of the time.
Yep.
And then we also became aware, even more than that, was the doctors and the scientists that were trying to talk about this message were even more in the wilderness.
Yep.
And that they needed a place where they could be with like-minded people, that they could discuss things openly and not be afraid that they're going to get attacked. And so that's been the main focus of LowCarbUSA since then, since that meeting, was like, okay, we have to cultivate a community and find a place where people can come, feel safe to come and be a part of it, and that they can talk about it without fear.
Yep. And I think two big things have happened early on as keto or low carb was becoming popular. A lot of the news media framed it as a new fad diet, right? Which you and I know is absolutely 100% false. This is the most ancient diet that the human species has eaten. And that's number one. And then also a lot of online influencers tried to frame it as something new, something I have discovered. Look what I have found, this new keto diet, because that's, as a businessman, you want to corner the market on something, or as a businesswoman. And so if you've cornered the market, then you're the guy, you're the gal that people go to for information, and that's good for business. But the problem is that's not true at all. That this is not a new diet. This is not a fad diet. This is basically a rediscovery of what I call a proper human diet. You need to eat lots of meat and some veg, lots of eggs, a few nuts, a few berries. That is a proper human diet. There's nothing faddish or weird or modern or new about that. And then the second thing that's happening, and it's happening with increasing frequency, is that large food manufacturers have seen, they're now, I don't even know, I couldn't even guesstimate how many millions of people around the world are eating a low carb, ketovore, carnivore diet. I mean, it's well above the hundreds of thousands at this point. I would guess it's in the low millions, and they see money there. And so now they're, Slim Fast has keto shakes. Everybody's coming out with keto bread, which by my definition is assuredly not keto, right? And everybody's got a keto cookie, cake, pie, candy, shake, meal replacement, and it's like they're trying to cash in on the popularity of the rediscovery of this proper human diet. And so for just the average person who's not a healthcare provider or dietitian, they just they saw a Facebook post about keto, and then they Googled it and they found a YouTube video, and they watched one of my YouTube videos about keto, and they're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, I'm going to try that. And then they start getting immediate results, but they don't understand this is not a new thing. This is very, you are rediscovering ancient wisdom, that when you feed the human body properly, it just spontaneously starts to heal, because that's how every wild animal's body reacts to a species appropriate diet. And so a lot of that is we're fighting against that narrative that became very popular early in this, thanks to big media, and also to the bigger influencers who were trying to make a name for themselves. And now we're stuck with, and now Big Food's marketing this crap that's not keto. And so I think it's very important for people to meet face to face and get together and say, how do you do your low carb? How do you do your keto? Because I'm doing this and it is working, or I'm doing this and it ain't working. What did you do? And then also when you meet people in person, it's almost like a family reunion. It's the coolest thing, or a class reunion. It's like you've never met these people in your life at a LowCarbUSA conference, but you feel like you're at a reunion of family or old friends. It's like, oh, I've been following you for 2 years on Instagram. It's so wonderful to meet you in person. And spontaneously, I think it takes those social media relationships to the next and deeper and more meaningful level when you've actually met that person in person. I think it's almost magical.
I think Pam does such a good job. So you're talking about how social media and that can still be a good thing, and so for the people that can't get there in person, we now have a fairly large live stream segment as well. And Pam, basically, they're all on the chat while they're watching, and Pam sits and like talks nonstop the whole weekend via the portal to them. And she just does such a good job of making them feel like part of that they're there. They're not going to be at the dinners, and they're not going to have those ultimate experiences, but they can still feel part of the community. And that's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you have agreed kindly to come and speak at our next event, which is in August in San Diego. And we want to try and get as many people there as possible, which is why I'm kind of talking to you about this, because we need to find ways to reach more people. That was why I was saying to you earlier, that's why I started this, because I couldn't believe that I got to the age of 52 and I didn't even know what a ketone was, and or what a proper diet should look like, right? And so we started trying to do this to reach more people, but we kind of pushing the boundaries here of our influence. And so we're trying to find ways to reach more people. So hopefully some people in your community will be able to want to come and join us in August as well. We've already booked for Boca next year again. And there's talk about doing another one either in the Midwest or New York or something like that sometime in the middle of the year. So
I think that people just don't realize the power of the personal empowerment of going to one of these low carb events. And you're going to walk away with a cell phone full of new contacts, new cell phone numbers, new email addresses. Whereas before you interacted, to some depth on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. But now you know that person, you've met that person, you put your hands on them, you've got their cell phone number, you can text them. That obviously takes that relationship to the next level, and strengthens it, right? Mm-hmm. Now you've got someone, if you're just having a bad day, you met this person who's just like you at Low Carb Boca or Low Carb San Diego, and you can text them and be like, man, I'm having a shit day, this and this and this. And they'll reply to you because they're your real actual friend.
And they get it, exactly.
They get it. They've been down that. They've walked in the same shoes that you're walking in, and they know exactly what to say to you because it happened to them too. And so if I know that, travel is expensive, attending the conference is expensive, but I would encourage everyone, if you have not been to one of these low carb events, save up your money. I promise you, it is an investment in your long-term physical and mental health to be part of this tribe, to in person part of this tribe. Take a friend with you if you have social anxiety, if you've never traveled that far alone. Take a friend, find a buddy who maybe doesn't live in the same town, but is also interested in low carb, and say, hey, let's go to this thing in San Diego together. Let's meet there and meet some new friends, and let's do this together. It for some people, it almost feels like a pilgrimage. It almost takes on a religious feeling to it, because you found this truth, sifting through all the bullshit on social media. You have found this truthful thing that works for you and improves your health. And now you want to meet other people who have found that same truth that you found. And I think when you do, I think it solidifies it in a way that nothing else can. It makes it real. It makes it tangible. And it just strengthens your resolve to continue doing what brought you to a level of health that perhaps you never thought you would enjoy again.
And we managed to get these conferences accredited now for continuing education credits for a lot of the practitioners and that. So, Brian Lenskes, a lot of people be familiar with Low Carb MD and stuff. And, he basically came down the road. His practice was just up the road from the San Diego event. And he saw it like the day before or something. And he came down and thought, oh, wow, I can get CME credits. I can basically walk there,
Yeah.
And he got converted there, and like, look what he's doing,
and I
amazing.
think there are a lot of people out there excited that they found this low carb therapeutic way of eating that actually improves their health, lowers their A1C, lowers their triglycerides, lowers their waistline, right? And so they're kind of eager to share it with their healthcare provider. And then they do so, and either the healthcare provider's never heard of such a thing, or they're actively denigrating low carb, keto, carnivore. Like, no, don't do that. I heard that's dangerous. And of course, their belief is founded on nothing. It's emptiness, right? But I think that now that healthcare providers can receive continuing medical education credits, I think that everyone whose doctor's like, oh, I don't know about low carb, I don't know about keto, you can invite them. Come to San Diego. You can actually get CME credits. And and I'll tell you this, you may not know this, as a healthcare provider, if a conference is offering CME, which is what doctors get, and I know there's other abbreviations for other healthcare providers, but that immediately in my mind is just a doctor, as a family physician. I'm like, oh, well, that's legit. Because they're not going to give some bullshit conference that's talking about duck butter and goose grease and stump water. They're not going to give them CME credit, right? So this has to be at least somewhat science-based, at least somewhat research-based, or they would not be able to offer me CME. And, there's a lot of healthcare providers that wouldn't mind a little tax-deductible vacation to San Diego in August. And so if they know, oh, man, I can get CME, and that makes this tax-deductible, I'm actually going to a medical conference. You can go hang out in beautiful San Diego, get some CME, and actually learn about this keto thing instead of just poo-pooing it and saying, oh, I don't know, that sounds dangerous. Why don't you shut your mouth and go to San Diego and actually learn about it? And that doesn't mean you have to become an advocate.
But at least expose yourself to the information. Exactly. and look at it.
If you come away and say, I still think keto's stupid, and I've listened to the preeminent speakers in the field, I've read the research, and I still think it's stupid. Well, at least then you've got an educated opinion. I still disagree with you, but at least your opinion is not completely unfounded.
Right.
And you got some CME.
Right. And these CMEs also qualify as what we've now termed CMHEs as well, continuing metabolic health education credits. For this new nonprofit organization that I was lucky enough to be a part of getting in place. And maybe give us your thoughts on that as well, the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners.
Well, I love the society that you and some very learned healthcare providers formed, and I think that that's an excellent way to spread spread the word and to make the science known at not just a consumer level, but actually at a healthcare provider level. Because as the average family doctor or internal medicine doctor, they have a patient panel of from 300 to 3,000 patients that when they have a doctor's visit, they're a captive audience. And they also trust the word of their doctor very, very much. And so if their doctor who they've been going to for the last 20 years and they trust with their literal life, right? That's what it implies when you have had a relationship with a doctor for 20 years. You trust that doctor with your literal life. When that doctor says something negative about low carb keto, that carries a lot of weight, even if that doctor's opinion is completely unfounded. But also in the same respect, if that doctor says, oh yeah, I just got back from a conference in San Diego, I learned a lot about it. It looks pretty legit. I think, yeah, why don't you try that for 3 months and see what happens? And I'll monitor your lab work and we'll see how you're doing. That carries a lot of weight. And there's no quicker way to turn off someone who's interviewing you as their prospective doctor. And their first patient visit, and you say something that's obviously irrational and unscientific about this proper human diet way of eating, you just lost a patient. And you also not only lost that patient, you lost every person that they ever talked to about you, because they're going to tell he doesn't even go by the science. Because the low carb diet is the most researched way of eating out there. If you compare the bulk of the literature on a low carb diet versus the American Diabetes Association recommended diet, it blows it away. It's not even close. The DASH diet that the American Heart Association recommends, the research is for it is anemic compared to the mountain of low carb research that's been done. And so I think the average healthcare provider would be happy to recommend at least a low carb, if not a ketogenic diet, if they knew about the literature and they knew about the science, and if they maybe pulled out their physiology textbook from the first year of med school and did some reading and said, oh God, yeah, ketones are not all bad. Because I'll tell you this, Doug, when I was in my early 40s as a board certified family physician who was a fellow in the American Academy of Family Physicians, like I was as high as you could get without being in leadership, I thought ketones were only bad. They were a sign of dehydration in pregnant women or in other people. Or if you were a type 1 diabetic, it was a sign that you were developing ketoacidosis. I had no idea of the literature that's been being put into the literature bank since the 60s, that ketones have therapeutic benefits in the human mammal. I had no idea as a board certified doctor. And and so there was no low carb San Diego, right, back then. And so if I had known, I would start to investigate this and look in the literature, and I'd have found all these studies. I would have found Finney, and I would have found Volek, and I would have found all these guys, but I didn't even know that there was something there that I should be looking for. And I think that's how your society is going to open the floodgates and get us much closer to the tipping point where it just becomes self-evident that human beings are by design low carbohydrate mammals. They have to eat a low carb diet in order to realize their optimal health on an individual basis.
You were talking about inviting your doctor to maybe attend these and get some CME credits, but something even easier than that is as part of this, the SMHP, is Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, we actually have a set of clinical guidelines there that are specifically there to help doctors who want to now try and embrace this in their practice. They're doing the rounds, and a lot of people have been using them, and they're very, very useful. But it's something that's now been translated into 9 or 10 languages, and people can go to the site and print out a PDF copy of it and take that to your doctor, and some of them will just bin it, but some of them will maybe read it and become enlightened, and that's how we can move this message forward, you know.
I think that's a great idea, and that's something I've never thought of before, Doug. Is if you're interviewing a new doctor, print out the society's guidelines of clinical practices.
Right.
That's an excellent idea, and take that to your doctor and say, "Look, doc, I'm not some kook who lives up on the mountain and just made this up. There are actual clinical guidelines that were formulated by healthcare providers.
Right.
Here's a copy. This is what I'm following. I didn't just make this up. This is not some fad. This has tons of science. It's tons of research. Here are the clinical guidelines. This will help you to help your other patients."
Right. It's amazing that, and that's what I think is happening more and more, that this whole thing, you know, I know Nina Teicholz, and I've worked with her a lot as well in terms of trying to get the US dietary guidelines changed. But I, as hard as she fights, I really don't feel like that's where the change is going to come.
No.
It's gonna come from the bottom up, where eventually they will change those guidelines because they are obsolete, because everybody's just not even doing that anymore.
And I'll give you a good example of that in the healthcare space. Back when I was a resident physician, God, that would have been in 2001, 2002. Electronic medical records were just becoming a thing that was even talked about, at least in my sphere, right? There may have been some bigger healthcare organizations that already had a CME back then, but I didn't know of any. And so on my Palm Pilot, you remember those? There was actually a program that you could download that was the roughest of electronic medical records. And basically all it did, you would tap in the information when you were interviewing your patient, and then it would print out a SOAP note. And healthcare providers know what that is, but for people who are not healthcare providers, that stands for subjective, objective assessment and plan, which is the standard way that doctors write up their note after a patient encounter. And then you could just Bluetooth that to a printer and print out your note. And so first of all, it was legible because it wasn't scribbled in my scribble. And secondly, it was for a young doctor, young resident, that was the coolest damn thing ever, that my notes were printed out where everybody else were scribbled. And so I didn't ask permission to do that. And the American Academy of Family Physicians didn't issue an edict and say, from this point forward, all family doctors will do this. It just started spontaneously happening. One resident at a time, one young doctor at a time started to use these very rudimentary electronic medical records. And so when I started my own medical practice in 2003, I started from day one with an electronic medical record. It was called Soapware. It was terrible, but it was written by a family doctor. I bought the whole suite for $400 or something ridiculous. And so from day one, I had an electronic medical record. Had the federal government ruled on that, if that was okay? I have no idea. Didn't know, didn't care, because I knew that this was the next logical step. That it made perfect sense. And so I just did it. And that's the thing that I think, God bless Nina Teicholz and the work she's doing. But I don't think the change is going to come from the top down. I think that the change is going to come from one doctor at a time, one dietitian at a time, realizing that a low-carb diet is self-evident. Once you've read enough of the research and you've looked at it and you've watched a few YouTube videos, you're like, well, duh. That you can't even argue with this. If you even consider the paleoanthropology, the ancestral part of it, and then you look at the existing research, you can't even argue that every human on the planet should be eating a low carbohydrate diet. Some lower than others, some it's okay to eat a little higher carb, but it's just self-evident. And once you've had that paradigm shift, you just start to practice that way. You don't even think about it. And the first question out of your mouth is not, oh, what meds are you taking? It's, oh, what's your diet? What are you eating? And that's when you know you've made the change. It's permanent. I'll never go back to writing up a handwritten SOAP note for a patient. That is the opposite of progress, right? And I'll never go back to recommending a high carbohydrate American Diabetes Association diet for someone with pre-diabetes or diabetes. That would be the opposite of getting better and making progress. And I think that's where the change is going to come, is not only from the patients, and you've seen this a lot, patients have woke their doctors up with regards to how important diet is. But once you guys start offering CME and enough doctors are on board, it's just going to become self-evident. Even the patients will know, oh, Dr. So-and-so, he reverses type 2 diabetes, where my doctor just treats it with pills. Why the hell would I not want to go to Dr. So-and-so and reverse my type 2 diabetes? That'll become known in the community. And that'll become known in the hospital doctor's lounge that, oh, if you've got a rough, diabetes patient that you just can't get a handle on, send it to Dr. So-and-so. He uses that low carb diet, and he'll make them better immediately.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, sort of in that same vein, I don't know if you're familiar with the story that Eric Westman tells about a patient that was sent to him like that, like with fatty liver disease.
Yep.
But it was his second liver. He had had a liver transplant because for no other reason than he had fatty liver.
Yeah.
Like obviously relatively severe, but they then put a new liver in it, and carried on with the same stupid diet, and he started to develop it again. And they sent him to Eric, and Eric, like a couple of weeks, and he was reversing or reversed already. It's just amazing. And I love so much, not being a doctor myself, is watching the doctors that do start to do this, how it's changed their lives, how suddenly, I mean, most of you guys went into this because you wanted to help people in some way. And most of you, until you found this, were desperately disillusioned by not being able to help them. And often even yourself. Brian Lenskes is an example. He was like getting fat and sick, just like the rest of his patients, following his own advice,
right.
And now I tell this story. We have a local San Diego meeting quite frequently. And afterwards, the one day, he was standing in a corner surrounded by a bunch of people, and he was jabbering away. And we were standing sort of off to the side with his wife. And she said to us, like, who is that guy? And what did you do with my husband? Because she said he was not a recluse, but he was very withdrawn and quiet, and would go out somewhere and he would sit in a corner and not talk to anyone, and just like, well, there's a time to go home yet,
Well, and I think there's a definite explanation for that. We can take Dr. Westman's fatty liver patient as a great example. So he'd already destroyed one liver by eating an inappropriate diet, and he was well on his way to destroying the second liver. But to a doctor who's not aware that diet plays the vital role that it plays, because most doctors don't believe that your diet matters at all. And so just imagine that patient went to a new doctor and said, yeah, I've got fatty liver, my enzymes are up, but this is my second liver. I've already destroyed one. The average doctor would think, well, he must have some genetic defect that just destroys his liver. I don't know. There's no pill for fatty liver. He doesn't have hepatitis. So I don't really know. Can you imagine the futility, the worthlessness that doctor, like, I can't help this guy at all. This guy's going to get sick, suffer, and die a painful death. And there's not a damn thing I can do about it as his doctor. No doctor wants to be in those shoes. That's not a fun place. And the average doctor who doesn't understand the proper human diet and the power behind it, that's the shoes that they walk in every day, is they see a bunch of patients who are getting progressively sicker and fatter, more diabetic, more fatty liver. They give them more and more pills. Nothing gets better. Nothing helps. That is not fun. The rate of physician suicide is much higher than the general population.
I've heard
and
that.
I suspect it's just for that very reason, is like you invested so much of your life into helping people get better, right? And all young people who grew up to be doctors, we watched MASH or Trapper John or Doogie Howser or Dr. House. We watched these guys cure people because it wouldn't be a fun TV show if they didn't cure them. But then when I'm walking in those shoes, hell, nobody gets better. And just imagine the frustration and just the depression that comes with that. But then all of a sudden to realize, to have the epiphany that the diet you recommend to a patient has a distinct, meaningful therapeutic benefit to that patient. And I'm not talking about a 1% benefit. I'm talking about you can transform that person's health. Dr. Westman's patient, after Dr. Westman happened to that patient, which I assure you he did happen to that guy, and gave him his one-page handout and said, do you understand me? If you ever eat these foods again, even the foods recommended by the AHA or the ADA, you will destroy this second liver. But if you will eat from my one-page handout, not only will you reverse your fatty liver that you currently have, you will protect that liver for decades. That's why Brian Linsky runs around like a crazy man, happy and smiling all the time, is because he can now have a meaningful therapeutic effect that matters, that's doable, that's affordable, that any patient, if they don't give a damn about their health, fine, let them go about their business and destroy their health. But if they would like to reverse their chronic health conditions, that door is now open. And I, as the doctor, can teach you how to do that and shepherd you and check labs and reassure you along the way. You don't have to destroy a second liver. You can actually stop this right now in its tracks, reverse it, and live the rest of your life with a happy, healthy liver. That is like the sun came out, Doug. That's like, oh my God, it's actually fun to be a doctor again. I'm actually living that life that I used to dream about when I was an adolescent or a teenager, watching these TV shows where at the end of each episode, the doctor cured the patient.
Yeah, now you're actually doing that too.
I can actually live that life now instead of being this depressed loser. That's what I felt like back in my late 30s and early 40s. It's like, I'm not helping anybody. This is stupid. I'm helping, Pfizer and Merck get richer. I'm helping all the pharmacists stay in business, but I'm not really helping my patients in any meaningful way unless I take a cockroach out of their ear, or I put their shoulder back in joint in the ER, or they've got a collapsed lung and I put a needle in. I saved their life.
Some kind of acute situation, yeah.
Yes, but on a daily basis, my chronic patients, I ain't helping nobody, and that's just defeats you as a human, as a healthcare provider. It just defeats you, it deflates you, and it depresses you ultimately. And I think that's why you see at the LowCarbUSA, all the healthcare providers are just on fire. They're energized, they're motivated, they're happy, they're meeting people, they're listening to these stories of chronic health conditions that have been reversed, that's not supposed to be possible. And once you start that kind of practice, you never go back to your old way of practice, just like you never get rid of your EMR and go back to writing handwritten notes again on your patient. It would be foolish to do that.
That was, and it's been, we've done like, this was like our 17th event or something, but at all of them, we put on these really cool low carb dinners in the evenings. And so often I've looked around, and it happened here again. Like I was literally looking around almost like a proud father, that you look at every table and there's like these animated conversations going on at every single table. Everybody is just like so inspired. And that it's just so rewarding to be able to know that I had a part in helping those people to find that way.
You should feel proud of the work you've done, because I mean, you've helped thousands of people. You've helped people. You've saved people's lives who you've never met, Doug. And that's the beauty of this way of eating and this way of living and this way of sharing information, is we don't have to wait 20 years for the American Heart Association to finally say, well, yeah, low carb, yeah, let's make that our primary recommendation. Looks like it's the best. You can start tomorrow, literally saving people's lives, and you're not even a doctor. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing, is that everybody, and that's why I'm doing this, is that you are so overcome by your experience, when you do make that change. Now, I wasn't totally sick, but I had a lot of issues, and like everything cleared up. And I was like, oh my God, like how did I not know about this? This was so easy. And then it's almost like you feel like you're compelled to tell. We always joke, about, it's like Fight Club, what's the first rule about keto is don't talk about keto, because everybody can't help themselves.
Right.
Once they've experienced it, it's like they can't keep quiet. And then, family and friends get so sick of you talking to them. But we have to keep talking to any, at least find the people that will listen, or that are ready to listen.
Yes,
and then that's the secret, right? Is don't just like regurgitate on people. Is find the people that are ready to make that change or to listen. And but every one of us is an evangelist now, so it's pretty cool.
And it's hard not to be. And so what I do, for example, on my YouTube videos is I make a video that I think is very helpful. I post it. And if somebody's not ready to hear that yet, they just click off it and go somewhere else, and that's fine. Right. But that video's there. It's evergreen. It's there 365. When they are ready, they're like, what was that crazy doctor's name with the Southern accent? Oh yeah, Barry. And then they Google and they look at it and they find it and they watch it, and now they're ready to hear it. And they're like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm going to try that. And now that's the model that I'm currently using, and it seems to be working pretty well. But yeah, we all have our own way of doing this. And I love the way you're doing this with the conferences and with the society. I think that's very important, very meaningful to do that, and to have to offer that as a meaningful thing, to offer that as a positive value. That's very valuable for somebody. If they've never met a group of people who are eating a low carb keto carnivore diet, they don't really understand the energy that's in that room, the camaraderie and the family, just the family vibe. Like, people are willing and eager to help you. If you don't understand something, they're going to help you understand that. And a lot of people have never experienced that before. I've been told that many times. It's like, this is so awesome, but also weird, because I have never been with a group of people who are so motivated, who are so happy, who are so upbeat, who are eager for the future, not dreading the future, right? And it's because we've rediscovered this very ancient way of eating that gives human beings their best health.
We've actually had a hotel contacted one of the Florida hotels, actually, that when we came back the next year, they said they'd had their debrief in the hotel after our meeting. And those back office, backroom cleaners and all of the back of house staff, that those guys have been there for 100 years, So they've done a lot of events, and they all said, she said, everyone without fail said, this is the best group we've ever had in the hotel. And Pam said something about drinking cream and eating butter or something, or meat and butter or whatever. Makes people happy, and there is a difference. I've heard before where some guy's been coming to tell me about how amazing his life has changed, and his wife's sitting next to him and saying, yeah, and he's a much nicer person too,
Almost without exception. I get that feedback when a husband or a wife has adopted a very low carb diet and stuck with it. Their spouse invariably will say, they're like the guy I used to date, or right. she's like back when she was younger. She's happy all the time. We get along better. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people understand the degree of marital strife and social conflict that comes from someone who's physically miserable, who's mentally addled and cloudy and miserable. It's so much easier to be negative when you feel like shit. But when you feel better physically and your mind is clear and you can think and you can actually plan and you can actually think good thoughts, you just become a nicer person. Yeah. And I think that's perhaps one of the things that's ultimately going to damp down some of the societal ennui and the societal agitation that we're currently seeing in modern society. I think as more and more people become metabolically healthy, therefore physically and mentally healthier, I think you're going to see people have more common sense and have more forethought and be able to hold their tongue when they're about to say something that they maybe shouldn't say, or say it in a better, more therapeutic way. That stuff comes naturally when you come from a place of health. But if you're coming from a place of suffering and disease, your knee-jerk response is to be negative, and your knee-jerk response is to be rude and to be crass and to be abrupt. And that, again, come to Low Carb San Diego, and if you don't believe me, and meet these people, and you're hard pressed to find someone who's having a bad day at one of these conferences.
That's very true, and I think that's maybe a really cool way to kind of end this, is to say, please come and see it for yourself. At the very least, sign up and join us on the live stream, and you can have an amazing chat with Pam, and live through the whole thing vicariously. If you know, but if you can make it, hell, it's totally worth it. Every single person that I've met that's ever come to any of our events has always said it was well worth the money, and that most of them will come back to future ones as well. So thank you very much for doing this, for helping us to get this word out, and for not just for these, but just for what you do in general. You're reaching so many people that is doing so much good. But on top of that, you're helping us to get our message out too by agreeing to come and speak at these events. So look forward to seeing you again in August. And yeah, thank you very much.
Well, it's a pleasure to chat with you, Doug, and it's always a pleasure to come to your events and to meet the people that tend to congregate around you. I love the work you're doing on the Society for Metabolic Health. Please don't ever stop that. I'm going to do everything in my power to continue to spread the word about a proper human diet and about the benefits of a low carbohydrate diet for both your physical health and for your mental health. And I think ultimately for the health of our society. I think that at some point it's going to matter at a societal level if enough people in that society are metabolically healthy or not. I think that's a very important metric that hopefully government officials will start to think about and look at one day in the future. But until such time, all we can do is help our friends and help our family to live healthier lives and to be better people. And I won't ever stop doing that. This is the way that I practice medicine now. And even if you're not a doctor, you can follow in Doug's footsteps and have some sort of meeting from, if it's just 2 people up to 2,000 people. You literally are making the world a better place when you recommend a proper human diet to your family and friends.
Yeah, maybe just a quick little thing to end it was one of our Canadian friends that started coming from the very first event, but how their kids listen to how they talk. And one of the kids has like a keto club or something at school, and she makes him put their lunches out, their lunch boxes. And she has this bag of sugar cubes, and she puts little sugar cubes in front of all the food, like piles them up to show them how much sugar is in the food that they've got there in their lunchbox. So when we're reaching people of that age already, then that's encouraging.
It is. I agree. Thank you so much, Doug.
Awesome. You've been listening to an episode of the Low Carb USA podcast. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/LowCarbUSA.